Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Neha Kabra from McKinsey to this episode. I should say at the outset that the views you're going to hear are Neha's personal thoughts based on her experience. Neha, welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm so glad you could join me today. Could you tell the audience a little bit about you and about McKinsey, please?
Fantastic. Ashley, thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to join you and your listeners. Thanks for having me. So, before we get into McKinsey, just a little bit of backstory on me. I am Neha Kabra, born and brought up in India in a conservative family based out of Mumbai. And I've had the opportunity and the privilege to live and work in 6 countries globally. So I've had a fairly, opportunity to create a fairly diverse perspective in terms of the way I think about things. Hopefully that helps you and the listeners today. And right now I'm based out of London, UK. I work with McKinsey. I'm an associate partner in the financial services practice, which means I primarily spend my time working with banks and insurance companies on some of the complex business problems that they face, on a daily BAU basis, but also more strategic basis. Before that, I did my MBA from Switzerland, and I am a career banker because before McKinsey, I actually worked with Standard Chartered Bank for about a decade in the corporate and institutional banking space. So thank you for having me once again. Excited to be here.
Great. Thank you. And I guess everyone knows McKinsey as one of the big leading consulting houses. So thank you
I
for
mean,
that.
I think everybody knows them, but again, just to build on to my answer, McKinsey is a global consulting company. We work with Fortune 500 companies, other companies, essentially to solve complex business problems for them. AI is obviously the latest one that we are, being kind of challenged and help our clients in solving one, right? So yeah, but everybody knows McKinsey, and it's such a privilege and honor to be working with them.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, getting into the conversation for this episode, which is really understanding how AI is impacting on organizations. And maybe we could make a start by looking at legacy leadership. How is the adoption of AI changing legacy leadership?
Wow, Ashley, you're starting with the big gun questions directly, but let's get into this. So, leadership has become very complex in general in, I would say, the last 2 or 3 decades. And there are various factors, technological advancements. There is, things like blockchain that have come into play, particularly, on the banking and insurance side that I work with a lot. There are geopolitical issues, tariffs, for example, being one classic, condition now. And then there are political situations, local regulations, etc. So in general, managing enterprise leadership has become challenging. AI has amplified that because now, along with all of those challenges, leaders are required to think about things at speed. So you might still, want to carve out an ambition for what the future is. You might want to deploy your resources in the way that is, most accretive to the business and to your key stakeholders, but you will have to do that at pace. And the reason for that is simple, right? I mean, if you look at the general adoption trends that we've seen, right? Internet to get to 100 million users took about 7 years, right? Mobile phones was about 4 years. Blockchain took 3 years. And ChatGPT to get to 100 million users was 2 months. So the pace of decision making is changing, although the nuances of decision making might not have changed as much, right? Getting specifically into AI, what we saw in 2023 and 2024 was some ambitious management teams, ambitious boards that actually got started like that, were the first movers and started on this journey of, identifying what the priority AI use cases would be, identifying ways of deploying those use cases, and then those are the businesses that have now started actually realizing some value, right, from those use cases. And you see that difference kind of from 2 different data sets. So, for example, there was a McKinsey study, there was an MIT study that said that 90% of generative AI use cases are not delivering value. But more recently, there's been a Wharton study that said, no, wait, 75% of the AI kind of people that we have interviewed actually measured ROI, and 3/4 of them are actually delivering ROI. And in my opinion, the big difference between the 2 sets or the 2 groups is really leadership, which is all elements of legacy leadership, but now deployed at speed. So that would be my take on how leadership is changing. I think it's the pace that is changing, but not the core crux of problem solving that still remains.
Great. Thank you. And I guess one of the issues is making sure that when companies adopt AI, they want to be focused on improving your customer experience, customer service. How do companies make sure that they are focused on their key stakeholders?
So customer service is probably one of the most measured activities in any organization. And this has been happening for the last, I would say, couple of decades now. So it's not unexpected that people are companies and businesses are starting with customer service as the way of optimization. But I guess the challenge is if you only think of customer service as a productivity initiative, which means you just want, let's take contact center as an example, right? You just want less number of calls, you want, lesser handling time, you want lesser work time in between calls. All of that is fine and it's a good start. It's probably going to get you 20-30% initial benefits, right? And if you put agentic AI on top, probably another 10-15%, right? But the catch is this. The catch is that you want to get all of those kind of savings and productivity benefits, but actually ensure a more empathetic, personalized customer service at the end of the day. So you're actually optimizing and automating the process, leveraging the AI, but you're not automating the relationship. The relationship still have to be deeply personal. So I think that's the balance that anybody who's looking on customer service, as one of the use cases that they want to deliver, is to basically look at it as a productivity angle to start with. That's fine. But really, it's more like a customer relationship building angle, right? And I could give you two different examples of how banks and financial services entities have looked at this problem differently and have had different outcomes, right? So I worked with a European bank, and they basically focused a lot on holistic contact center optimization. So not just productivity, but also empathetic conversations. They trained their AI models from day one to identify, the sentiment with which the customers were calling. And based on the sentiments that were recognized, they actually were able to either resolve it digitally, so completely in an automated fashion, or, have a human in the loop to have those better customer outcomes, right? In this case, in the first 18 months, they saw a 20-25% better productivity gains, but at the same time, their NPS improved by 8 percentage points. Now, that's a win-win, right? So you're spending less, but you're effectively serving your customers. And the other on the other side, the much more publicized example, which was actually covered very well in all of the mainstream media, is Klarna. So Klarna is basically a buy now, pay later platform. They now want to get into broader banking. What they did last year is they basically let go of 700 customer service representatives and they substituted the chatbot completely with AI-enabled discussion. Right? Initially, it was all fine, productivity gains, but soon they realized that customers were calling in for financial support, or for vulnerable, empathetic kind of conversations, and the chatbot was not able to meet the thing. And so now they've actually reversed that AI only strategy, and they've actually now got into a way that they want to still deliver customer service in a more effective way, but it is now AI augmented human customer service, right? So I guess that tells you the difference between you want to just look at customers and customer service, but at the same time, you want to not just have productivity as an angle, but also look at empathy and better NPS and customer outcomes, right? So moving on from, customers as the key stakeholder, right? I think the same logic actually applies to, your employees and then broader stakeholders like, boards and regulators, right? It's important to not just take productivity lens on either of these. Let's take employees as an example. If you lead with, okay, let's do this thing on AI and it will help us save 30% cost, that's a commitment we've made to the investors. That's exactly where you lose employees. Because the moment they know that the AI usage actually potentially could put their jobs at risk, it's gone. They're never as invested. And so the best way to do it is AI is actually, augmenting the way you do things. And by the way, my typical observation on customer service side, but also more broadly, is that in general, humans like us were not designed for 9 to 5 repetitive work. So people like customer service representatives and agents, if you actually show them that, look, I'm going to free up maybe 2 hours in a day out of your 8-hour workday, and the 2 hours you can really use, for whatever else, right? Maybe, having complex conversations with the customers, maybe upgrading your skill set, maybe learning to use AI better. I think employees, customer service representatives actually prefer that, right? Because everybody wants career growth and everybody wants their day-to-day job to be meaningful, right? So leading with productivity on an employee side of things is a big no-no. Structure your narrative to talk about augmentation and then show the employee proof points of, yes, this is truly not just management saying things, but AI being used for augmentation, right? And then if we expand this out to boards and regulators, for example, as other key stakeholders, I think the key question there is, how do you actually show trust, auditability, explainability, right? So again, it's much more than productivity. It is, how do we make sure that whatever conversations happen with a particular customer a year back is actually traceable, auditable, and you can actually, figure out why AI took certain decisions and what was the crux of that. So each stakeholder group is really looking for very different things. And AI has the opportunity to really solve for productivity, growth, and just better satisfaction across all those stakeholder groups.
That's really very comprehensive response, because most people just focus on the customers and leave behind other stakeholders like employees. I'm pleased that you covered those as well. You mentioned people and AI working together, so people are work is augmented, or the work that people do is augmented by AI. Increasingly, I think you're starting to see teams being made up of human beings and AI, whether it's Gen AI or AI agents. How can leaders manage this transformation to having people machine teams working together?
That is a great question. And honestly, that is one of the toughest things to solve for right now because technology is very nascent. There are some early adopters who've been experimenting this, but really, like everybody just trying to experiment, do a lot of A/B tests and figure the way out, right? But in kind of my experience and my work with my clients, I think there are three things potentially that could be done to make sure that this works, like the human AI, getting together works in a more lubricated fashion, right? So the first one is you want to make sure that there is clear division of roles and responsibilities between humans and AI. What that means is, look, there's always going to be human in the loop for sure, particularly in regulated industries like banking and insurance. But the challenge is to have a very clear view for that particular use case or that particular problem statement of where the AI work stops and how does the handover happens to humans.
Hmm.
Or if the AI is doing, something end to end, at what point or what's the definition of edge cases that you really want, humans to get involved in, right? So I think definition of the roles and responsibilities of, let's say, your human AI joint team, I think it's one of the key issues, right? Number two is one of the things that I've heard from, client colleagues on the ground as they deploy AI is, I do not trust AI yet because what if, AI is doing 60% of the process, I am doing the last 40%, and if there is a mistake that AI makes in the first 60%, it will basically affect what I do in the last 40%, right? It's a great, great issue, and this goes back to the point I was making around trust, right? So you want to make sure that you have, again, going back to the point, explainability and auditability in the system, not just from a regulatory perspective, but let's say when something goes wrong, you're able to actually track it down to say that this was actually not the issue with the human representative involved. It was actually an AI generated issue, right? And this is something that you don't want to blame anything or anybody, but at least there's a feedback loop involved and you want to solve it in the right way. And then the third thing is, it's very important, and I cannot overemphasize this, to get human colleagues very comfortable with AI. And the best example, and I always mention this, is look at what OpenAI is doing in India. So they wanted adoption in India. India is a price sensitive market, but at the same time, it can give them access to, 1 billion in terms of population, right? And so what they did is in August, they basically started with, ChatGPT Go, which was, I think, like $5 a month kind of a thing. And now they've announced, I think a couple of weeks back, they're actually going to make it entirely free for the next 1 year for anybody that joins. So what they're essentially doing is they're building a user base in India, and they're basically not giving any excuse to Indians to not sign up to the platform. that's the kind of lens that organizations need to take for learning and development on AI. If left, you have to like make it a combination of, yes, self-directed learning and development, but also organizationally mandated learning and development. And things are moving so fast that you want to make sure that the average human in your organization also sees an upgrade in their skill sets while they're, optimizing the overall process or overall outcome working with AI. So I'd suggest those 3 steps, just to make sure that this operates in a, I wouldn't say frictionless, but less friction, more lubricated way.
Yes. And you can begin to see as well during that transition, people may well start to get quite nervous about, well, today the AI, my AI partner is maybe doing 20% of what I'm doing, but over a period of time may well be doing much more. How does that tension play out in your view?
Yes, it is a real challenge. I see it in every single AI deployment I've done. But also, Ashley, there is no easy way out of this question.
Mm.
I mean, the real outcome that we will all see in the next 24 months, probably sooner, given the pace at which things are happening, is that, there are always, if you just classify colleagues on the basis of performance, right? So maybe like the colleagues that are at risk with this shift are colleagues who are already underperforming, lowest quartile. AI will just be the reason for why companies might decide to, let them go. But the colleagues who are actually able to keep up with this are actually able to use all the organizational resources and are actually truly able to use AI to make them do the job better are the ones that will stick on. So it's not an easy thing. You've got to like show up, you've got to do the work as a human colleague to get to know your AI colleague and how you work with it. I mean, that also is, I think like the word that I was actually looking for is like you need to have that agency to be able to like not just stick with, okay, I will live with whatever the organization tells me to do, but like really take your own initiatives and just like get better at what you do. So that's what I see practically happening already, by the way, on some of the early adopters of this technology.
Wow, that's interesting because from a senior management perspective, clearly providing that level of training and support is core to what most good organizations and leaders should do. But equally, there's a balance or a trade-off, isn't there, between on the one hand productivity improvements, and very often that does mean doing more with less, and on the other hand, you've got the pressure to show value and innovate. How do you balance this growth, innovation, and productivity, potentially cost cutting agendas that leaders are going to be facing?
Right. So the way I think of AI is that it is actually going to increase the value pool, right? Yes, productivity is one element, but ultimately, and there have been many examples in the past, right, that we can look on. Whenever a technology comes, initially there's going to be this curve of, okay, huge productivity benefits, but ultimately the technology just does lead to overall much higher value creation, probably in multiples from whatever you see today. And at the same time, technologies tend to get job accretive, right? So what I mean by that, and we can look at history for this, right? I mean, when farming was mechanized, people said, okay, what are the farmers going to do? Well, look what, there was an industrial revolution, right? And factories came in and you just started producing more, right? Then, factories got automated and people said, okay, what is everybody going to do? Well, you know what? Service industry became big. And you had like all of the BPOs, KPOs, outsourcing, shoring, and, like call centers operating from like, low cost locations, manufacturing being done in China, like all of that came through. So I don't see a reason why we should look at AI as different from any of these history, like whatever history tells us. Now, whether there's going to be pain in the near future, for sure, because near future, it's very easy for management to show that they're working on AI already. And productivity gains, by the way, are the easiest to show. It's difficult to achieve growth using AI, but productivity is very easy to show. So that is going to happen. But ultimately, my view is that it will just need to a net new creation of jobs, of value. And so the roles that you see today will be radically different or will be completely new as compared to, like what people are doing today. As an example, you might not have, customer service agents in the traditional sense that you see today across most organizations, but you will probably have like, more personalized relationship management, right? Like even for like retail customers, right? Which you don't get to see today, right? So that would be my view. But there is going to be some short-term pain before we get to that stage.
And whether it's growth or whether it's productivity improvements and cost reductions, that really does mean the organization's going to have to adopt AI at some level of scale. Yet, you hear of many Gen AI pilots not delivering the value. Is there a reason why these pilots are not scaling up, not delivering value?
Yes. But I think like what you've asked me is like a two-part question. So let me try to break it down a little bit.
Please.
So the first thing on productivity, and to be doing AI at scale. So AI at scale, as we already discussed, doesn't only mean productivity. It would mean growth, and it would mean like net better satisfaction of whatever stakeholder group you're dealing with. That's like the three kind of levers that we look at.
Yeah.
Now, what successful businesses are doing, and which will also then tie up to the Gen AI, use cases not delivering, right? What successful businesses are doing is that they are actually reinvesting what they save on AI related productivity gains into growth initiatives. And I can give you an example of a bank that I recently worked with in Europe, in Western Europe. What they basically did is they streamlined their operations on, I think, loan document, structuring and management by about 8%. But whatever savings that they had from that particular use case, they then, invested in making, personal loan journeys better digitally, and then making better personal loan recommendations, right? So like it was more like, in-app, getting like a notification that you can get like a personal loan, and just making the journey like 3 clicks super smooth, right? So on the one hand, they saved costs by 8% for that particular business unit. On the other hand, they basically saw their uptake of personal loans go up by 12%. So that is like creating value on the productivity side, reinvesting, and then, getting growth out of it. And in the process, obviously, because customers were buying more, you got stronger relationships, more stickiness, and just better overall satisfaction, right? So that's like the answer to the first question.
Yeah.
You see this happening now in all of the early adopters of Gen AI or agentic AI, although agentic is very new right now. And they have already started seeing some gains, some ROI returns, right? Like returns on investment from that. Now, why does this not work for most organizations? I think there are 3 reasons for that, right? Like one is data foundations not being correct. So if you don't understand, read, interpret, and utilize the data in the same way for a particular use case, you will always get different outcomes. Even if you get good outcomes, they might not be effectively measured. And even if they are measured, management might just not agree to the measurement tactics used, right? So I think getting the foundation data right is one of the key things. Your LLM, your AI deployment is as good or as dumb as the data that sits behind it. So that's point one. Point number 2 is not having the clarity of what kind of organization you want to be. And this is where boards and management teams can help, and there are like typically 3 archetypes that we see. You might want to be an AI first organization. Like I think JP Morgan, right, has gone all out and said that, look, we are having 18 billion spent on tech every year. Out of that, we are committing to spend 2 billion on AI. By the way, we've already started seeing return on a bunch of that 2 billion, right? So they are committing, they're wanting to do things very clearly. They want to become AI first, right? Second is you want to become human augmented, right? So like you want to like lead with human, but just have AI to like, take care of the nitty gritties. And then the third one is you want to have AI augmented, which is what Klarna is now doing, where they're basically now consolidating AI and human colleagues into creating a much better customer service proposition. So the second reason why generative AI use cases might not deliver is because you're just looking at that one particular use case in isolation without having like a strategic view of how this fits into the overall organizational ambition. And then the third thing I'd say, which actually is, also something that McKinsey wrote a great article about, I think like a couple of months back, is that everybody, when this whole wave of generative AI started, they started building, very generic co-pilots, generic chatbots. Those are like horizontal use cases, which are never going to, really give you a lot of value. The value comes from building vertical use cases. For example, can I create a chatbot that specifically helps me control fraud? So fraud reporting happens, fraud resolution happens, fraud aggregation happens as a part of that chatbot. Or can I have a co-pilot specifically dedicated to a certain part of my contact center that is dealing with vulnerable customers? So the more specific you make a particular use case, the more likely you're able to realize value, measure that value, and then scale that value. So I'd say like those three things: practically getting the foundation element right, getting the design elements of horizontal versus vertical use cases, and then making sure you have, you're not just doing AI for the sake of it. You know how it kind of stacks into your overall organizational ambition, and then you're solving for that. Those three should help.
Neha, you've covered quite a wide range of things that boards are to focus on.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to maybe kind of pull that together into what, for you, would be the key priority areas that boards ought to be focused on when they're coming to this area of AI?
I think the first thing I'd start with is just drawing the distinction between board and management, right? So the board of directors is actually responsible, I would say, for setting the ambition, governance, kind of being the curators of what actually, how the organization is working towards a specific vision, right? And then the management is the one that actually executes on that vision. So board, let's say, defines the ambition, and management defines the momentum or executes on the momentum. Now, with that understanding in mind, I think a few things that boards would need to do to be able to get this, like, I wouldn't say like, because there's a lot of experimentation involved, but to be able to move forward on this journey of AI. I mean, it's still very nascent for a lot of organizations. First thing I'd say is that get the strategic ambition very clear. What do you want to be, and how do you want to like have AI as a part of that strategy? Is it AI first versus human first, or anything in between? And what does that mean, right? And make sure that the board as a whole is aligned on this, but also management team is taken along, key stakeholders are taken along, right? That would be like the first thing that a very effective board should be doing. Second thing is boards through their various directorships, board members through their various directorships have access to whatever is the best in class on other companies that they're serving. They have access to like industry, thought leadership. They have access to like both failures and celebrations happening, in the domain that they specialize in. So I think they've got to find a way of matching that internal execution with that external curation, right? Or insights, right? To be able to shape how the AI execution will work, right? And then the third thing is they need to actually adjust their risk appetite.
Mhm.
I have been in so many conversations where the management wants to go big, but they know that the board is not going to approve, right? Now, I completely understand that every board has their risk appetite. They've also got to take regulation and other considerations into mind. They have a broader reputation, stakeholder management. Like, I get all of that, right? But if you want to experiment on a technology that is moving, every quarter, if not every month,
Yeah.
then you've got to increase your risk appetite and make sure you create a safe space for your management teams, for your employees to really experiment. Even if that means that, okay, I want to like just spend 10% of whatever investable capital I have in experimenting or building a center of excellence, or, doing some like, A/B testing in sandbox environment and then taking the best of it, right? Most banks, most insurance companies today they're even remotely interested in AI have actually adjusted their risk appetite already. That was the work that has happened over the last 18 months, right? Like since the beginning of 2024. And they're now willing to like give management a little bit more bandwidth and leeway in terms of how to move forward on this. So I think like those three things would be key. By the way, the other thing is also that, boards also have the ability to, figure out what the right partnership for a particular company would be, because it's not like you can just execute everything internally. You've got to have the right experts and external colleagues and partners helping you along the way. So I'd say those four things.
Yeah, and just thinking about, those partnerships, those external organizations, what role can those partnerships play in delivering, high impact in terms of AI adoption?
Yes. So again, like my belief here is that AI is going to be net value accretive. It's going to create a lot of value, net job creation. There might be like a little bit of a blip, in the immediate kind of, foreseeable future. But I mean, ultimately, if you look at game theory, for example, right, the
Mm.
sum of parts can be greater than one. And then, You can have different strategies on how you actually deploy and win on game theory. You might be like competing with somebody, but you might also like think of collaborating. And some of the best examples out there are people who are at the forefront of this AI technology, which is all of the hyperscalers. Like the number of arrangements and deals that they have ongoing between them, it basically indicates two things. First is everybody's trying to solve something and they might all have a different answer. And number two is they don't know what answer is going to be most relevant in the future. And so they just want to make sure that they have a skin in the game across those multiple combinations, right? And if I were to extend that to maybe mainstream industry clients or industry companies and businesses that we work with, they potentially need to have experts across three dimensions. So first is, tying up with hyperscalers like, large language model operators like ChatGPT, like Claude, Anthropic, right? Cohere is another one, right? Get the infrastructure, tech stack, data together. For example, tie up with cloud providers like Azure and AWS Cloud. That's like stage one of getting the infrastructure right on AI. Stage two would be then, okay, we want to tie up with, somebody who can actually help us execute on AI, who has a deep understanding and domain expertise, on business, but then they could like work with us to like tell us how it's actually done, learning from all other examples out there in the market. This is where consulting firms like McKinsey are great partners. And then number three is you might actually have, partnerships relevant to specific workflows. For example, if you're thinking of reimagining your CRM system, then it's Salesforce, or something on the customer service side, maybe ServiceNow. So I think it's different experts that need to come in to support an organization on a fast moving technology to be able to get the right value out of this. You might, by the way, also want to tie up with somebody on the risk and governance, right? Like AI governance experts, for example. So for me, I think partnerships are hugely important. It's true for anything, not just AI. Any new technology will have somebody who's ahead of you, somebody who's like laterally, involved like you are, and you just want to make sure that you get the best of that in if you're serious about AI. There's always like one opportunity to wait and just see it through. But I think that's not an answer right now, given the pace of change. So
Picking up on that point of the pace of change, one of the things that's clearly being talked about and being written about, and you're beginning to see some evidence of this, and that is these entry level, these first tier jobs that appear to be going because, AI is coming in, AI agents are coming in to do those kind of basic entry level jobs. For younger people coming through and looking to kind of get their first foot on that rung of the career ladder, what should they be doing? What should they be thinking about to kind of future proof themselves given the rapid pace of change that you've spoken about?
yes, this is a tough one. And I say this because I am coming off a discussion with 4 UK university graduates last week, where the question was very simple. We've done everything right. We went to the best college. Why are we not getting a job? Right.
Mm.
And it's a tough question as somebody who's, let's say, you know, senior to them, I can only give them thoughts, suggestions, ideas, maybe connect them to a few people, but the challenge is real. And this is 4 graduates from a good UK university. So I'm going to like play back what I discussed with them because we actually problem solved it together. So this also considers how they feel about things and not just my opinion. Um, so two things. Like one is there is a general understanding, or there was a shared understanding within that group that today is more about technical skills, but ultimately AI is going to be a great equalizer. Everybody will have the same level of technical skills. You probably not even need technical skills. Vibe coding is a classic example right now. Yes, I mean, it's not very evolved, not very mature. You would still not deploy an enterprise use case off the back of vibe coding. I get that. But, the technology is getting better fast and it's equalizing everything. So you're probably not going to need as much of technical skills as thinking skills in the future. So here is what we discussed and here's what I recommended to them. First of all is there has to be a pivot of just being able to attract things, like pulling things to yourself just because you went to a great business school or you worked with like a great firm or something. That's not going to happen naturally. And even if it's happening, it is happening at like 30% of what it was happening before. So you want to start like pushing out things, reaching out to people, building stuff in public, just showing like, your general awareness and interest in the topic of AI and whatever like domain you want to build expertise in. So there's this shift from push versus pull that is happening right now. And as you kind of push and reach out to more and more people, I think there are three skills that the younger generation needs to build. One is your AI, LLMs, all of the foundational skills, because that will help you build the ability to reason in the future. Now, when I say foundation skills, I just don't mean prompt writing, right? I mean, all of us saw in 2023, 2024, prompt writing was probably the most advertised job, like, $500,000 in pay, sitting out of Silicon Valley and stuff. And now AI writes better prompt than anybody does, right? So I think what I'm talking about is not just being able to solve for a particular tool or a particular job type, but really building the skills to understand what AI is doing and being able to interpret and reason with AI. That's different. So that's the kind of foundational skills we want. Second is build your human skills. Because ultimately, when this technology stabilizes, when the dust settles down, what will still remain is the need to have interpersonal connections, having a high emotional quotient, making sure that you're able to work in teams, in different groups of people. Um, and that actually, in my opinion, if technology becomes an equalizer, then human skills, in my opinion, will be the big differentiator. So you're probably not going to use them as much in the next 6 months, but you will need them 2 years down the line. And then the final thing I would suggest is, building off a little bit of the human skills point, is that if you were to ever believe Sam Altman and his vision of one CEO running with different types of AI agents. By the way, I do not believe in that vision. I am all for human augmented AI and stuff, or AI augmented human. But I think the point is, imagine you were in a situation, you need to be able to not just know your real area of expertise, but kind of have a T-shaped view of how you look at things. So you should be able to solve for HR questions, production questions, technology questions, data questions, industry context questions, while having one area of deep dive. So that is what I call the T-shaped curve, right? Like in terms of your skill set. This is not going to be easy for the generation that is going through it, like for the young graduates that are looking for jobs. But I think there is the only risk right now is not having the agency and just like living with inertia that, I'm not getting a pull, I'm not getting employed or whatever. I think you've got to take matters in your own hands. And I would recommend thinking through it in a more structured way. So while you continue to find opportunities, really invest in building the three sets of skills.
Neha, thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation. I feel like we've almost come full circle because we started the conversation looking at legacy leadership and really what you're just talking about in terms of leaders for the future are going to have to adapt to this new world. And if that means pushing, as you put it, getting out there, making themselves valuable in using the technology, but also being able to demonstrate that they can lead and have the interpersonal skills, the human skills, together with this technology. I think that takes us back to where legacy leadership needs to change and needs to be as well. What a great conversation. Thank you so much for being on the AI Adoption Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. It's been great to be here, and I hope this was insightful. And yeah, looking forward to more of the podcast and the great guests you're going to be having. So thanks for having me.